The study isn't controversial. It's been replicated for decades, across income levels, across cultures, across every stated level of financial motivation. And the result is always the same. People placed under strict budgeting restrictions don't end up spending less. In the 48 to 72 hours after the restriction lifts, they spend 30 to 40% more than they did before the budget ever started. Every time. You've lived this even without the numbers to prove it. Week 1 clean, week 2 still holding. Week 3, one slip, and somehow that one slip becomes 6 purchases before the day is over. And then the question that follows, the one nobody says out loud: why does trying harder always end exactly the same way? Here's what that question is actually pointing at. It's not a willpower problem. It's not a commitment issue. It's a design problem specifically, a problem of what signal your budget is sending to a part of your brain that operates completely below your conscious awareness. And that signal, once you understand how it works, changes everything about why budgets fail and what it actually takes to fix them. Because you cannot budget your way out of a trap that you built using the wrong materials. The behavioral finance research is straightforward. Participants in financial restriction studies are placed under tight spending controls for 30 days. Every transaction tracked, every discretionary dollar eliminated. Researchers then measure what happens in the following week. Spending doesn't normalize, it erupts. 30 to 40% above baseline, across every income bracket, every level of stated discipline, every demographic. The tighter the restriction, the more dramatic the rebound. And the part that's hardest to accept, this isn't weak people falling apart. This is every participant, without exception. Here's why. Your brain has a hard-coded survival response to perceived resource restriction. When spending starts to feel constrained, when the tracker shows red, when the budget kicks in, when you say no for the 4th time in a week, something deeper than your logic brain reads this as a single message: scarcity incoming. And every biological system built for survival has one response to scarcity: secure resources at the first available opportunity. Think of it as a compressed spring. Every day you run the tight budget, every no you force, every purchase you track, every category you push into the red, you're not building discipline. You're loading a spring. The spring doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't know you're trying to pay off debt or save for something real. It just registers, restriction detected, load the spring. What makes this mechanism so difficult to interrupt is what happens to impulse control during extended restriction. Studies on financial decision-making show that repeatedly resisting small purchases doesn't just cost willpower in the moment. It depletes something more structural. Think of self-regulation as a reservoir. Every time you look at something and say no, not because the decision is automatic, but because you have to actively override an impulse, you draw from that reservoir. A tight budget is essentially a machine designed to create maximum draw on that reservoir every single day. By week 3, you're not the same person who started. The person who started had a full tank. The person in week 3 is running on fumes. And the spring is still loading. Then a permission slip arrives. Payday, the weekend, a stressful Thursday afternoon, a dinner where someone says this one doesn't count, and the spring releases. Not because you failed, because that's what compressed springs do. Now here's the turn, and this is the part that most financial advice is structured to avoid. The impulse purchases, the off-budget splurges, the emotional spending that blows your month, these are not the cause of your financial problem. They are the symptom of a mechanism your budget is accidentally triggering. You're not fighting the spending. You're fighting the rebound pressure that the restriction created. And you're fighting it with more restriction, which loads a bigger spring, which creates a larger eruption when the next permission slip finds you. This is why the failure pattern has a shape you've probably seen before. Tight budget, restriction signal, spring loading, permission slip, eruption, shame, tighter budget next month to compensate, bigger spring, bigger eruption. If this has happened to you more than twice, it's not a coincidence and it's not a character flaw. It's a feedback loop built directly into the architecture of the system you're using. The reason this stays invisible is that every cultural message around money points in exactly the wrong direction. Try harder, track more carefully, be more disciplined. But what does discipline mean inside this mechanism? More restriction, more spring loading, a larger eventual release. The harder you try within the existing design, the worse the underlying problem gets, not eventually, right now. And the shame cycle makes it self-reinforcing in a way that's almost structurally elegant. One slip, shame activates. Emotional spending follows to temporarily suppress the cortisol. Because somewhere along the way, your brain learned that buying something provides about 3 minutes of neurological relief. The budget blows, more shame, tighter budget next month to compensate. You weren't undisciplined. You were using a system that converts discipline directly into pressure, and pressure, held long enough, always finds a release. The solution isn't to stop managing your money. The solution is to stop sending the restriction signal to the part of your brain that converts restriction into rebound. There are specific budget behaviors that activate the famine circuit, and specific behaviors that don't. Tracking every transaction in real time against a shrinking limit activates it. Automated transfers that move money before you ever see it doesn't activate it. Focusing on what you can spend rather than what you can't doesn't activate it. Assigning dollars to visible goals rather than subtracting them from a disappearing total doesn't activate it. The design principle is simple. When you remove the experience of restriction, you eliminate the signal that creates the rebound. The spring can't load if it never feels compressed. When you stop fighting the famine circuit and start designing around it, something happens that doesn't feel like discipline because it isn't. Automation doesn't require willpower. Structure doesn't require motivation. A system running quietly in the background doesn't need you to show up with a full tank every single morning. This is the difference between managing money and designing a financial system. One requires you to be a different, stronger person every day. The other works while you're exactly the same person you've always been. If you've restarted the same budget 3 times, you haven't failed 3 times. You've correctly discovered that the same spring, loaded and released 3 different ways, still snaps when compressed hard enough. The question worth asking isn't, how do I get more disciplined? The question is, which design stops the spring from loading in the first place? That redesign starts with finding exactly where in your current system the restriction signal fires, the categories you track too closely, the limits that feel like walls instead of guides, the moments where no requires real effort instead of being the invisible default. Once you can see those pressure points, and they're different for everyone, the fixes become specific, not budget harder, not try again. Redirect money before the restriction signal gets a chance to fire. Automate the most important decisions so willpower doesn't need to show up. Give every dollar a destination that feels like direction, not a cage. Your brain can't load a spring it can't feel, and a spring it can't feel is a spring it can't release. The study keeps running, same setup, same result. Restriction then rebound, not because people are weak. Because people are built exactly as the biology designed them, hardwired to compensate for scarcity the moment scarcity lifts. The people who manage money without fighting themselves every day didn't find better willpower. They found a better design. That's the only difference. And now you know which one was always worth looking for.